Hello, everyone. I'm Erik D'Souza, and this is a continuation of our celebration of the shortlist nominees for the Crime Writers of Canada's Award of Excellence 2022. Today, we'll be speaking with Elizabeth Elwood, whose story, Number 10 Marlborough Place, was published in Dell magazine, is shortlisted for this year's Best Crime Short Story, sponsored by Mystery Magazine. Welcome, Elizabeth, and thank you for agreeing to do this interview.
Thank you, Erik.
Now, I know you're quite invested in the arts, but short stories. So let's start with short stories. I read a few of your Beary Mystery series, uh, but your number 10, Marlborough Place, doesn't include the Beary family. Instead, it was inspired by events of your youth. So, what could you tell us about it?
Well, it started when I was watching an episode of The Crown, and it was the episode that dealt with the Great Fog of London, which was in 1952. And I said to my husband, "Oh, I remember that," because I was 6 years old. And I remember going out into this gray yellow mist and my mother wrapping a scarf around our face. And then having started to reminisce, I started to reminisce about other things that I associated in my mind with that same period. And one of them was there was a train crash at the Harrow Wealdstone station in the October of that year. And it's actually still considered the worst peacetime rail crash in Britain ever. And one of my friend's fathers was actually in it. He was okay. And he's nothing like the character in the book. But, I remember we walked up the road and looked at this pyramid of coaches, which was quite, made quite an impression on my young brain. And then I remembered too, in that general period, the scare with the Christie murderers, 10 Rillington Place, and they discovered all the bodies. And I guess our grandmother probably put the fear into my brother and myself, be careful, right? Christie's out there, because there was a week where he was on the run and they were looking for him. And that was, I think, the March of the following year. But having reminisced to my husband about these events when I was 6 years old, I started to Google them, and then I saw that they were literally all across one winter. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be an interesting challenge to create fictitious characters, but write a mystery that connected and used those three real events, plus, of course, a lot of my good childhood memories of the period too, like the famous 5 books and the Rupert Bear album annuals and, the paper chains, all the fun stuff. So yeah, it was really it was fun to write, taking that and putting them all together. So it's lovely that it was acknowledged and put on the short list. I was really pleased.
Yes, yeah, congratulations. It sounds like a very interesting story. I can't obviously admit to remembering the fog, but I remember when it happened on the Crown. um, as we mentioned, I've met you through the years. We both live in British Columbia, and I met you even before writing crime novels myself. I met you at some book fairs, and slowly I've been buying up your book. Um, and you write about the Barry family. It's not a I don't know if you're the only one to do this, but it's quite a unique or rare thing that you write short stories, but you tie them all together with a family, and it's sort of the adventures of the different members of the family. So what could you tell us about the Barry family?
Well, I think the book started actually because of one of my plays. I wrote a play called Casting for Murder, and it had Bertram Beary, who was the city councillor, as one of the main characters. And the audiences loved him. They really seemed to relate to this character. I mean, he is quite a character. And so then I thought, well, it would be kind of fun to give him a family and write a series of short stories. I didn't want to just write about a city councillor, and I thought it would be a good excuse to use a whole variety of my other areas of experience. So I gave him an opera singing daughter, because I used to sing in the Vancouver Opera Chorus and did shows in my youth, and a wife in teaching, because my husband and I, of course, were both high school teachers. and another daughter who's a lawyer, because I've had experiences with lawyers. I mean, none in the family. But so I just thought it would be interesting to cover all those different areas. Plus, I had a daughter who has a marionette company, which we've had too. So it was fun to write these, and then I could focus on different members of the family at different times. And yet there would be an ongoing story of the family. And yet each one is a separate mystery. And the first book, people seem to enjoy it. And so that's why I carried on with and ended up with 6 of them.
Yeah, I think that they're very fun, because often when you tell people you write short stories, I'm sure you get the, well, I love your characters, I don't get so much of them, but this way you do get to spend time with your characters. So it's great. You mentioned Philippa, the opera singer, and this sort of ties in, as again, you mentioned your theater, right? So I know you write playwrights and also marionettes. Is that a very different experience, writing for the theater as opposed to writing short stories?
Yes, it is, because when you're writing for the theater, you have to look at a whole bunch of practical issues that you don't have to deal with a short story. You know, if you're writing, and even writing plays for people as opposed to plays for the marionettes, plays for marionettes, you can have a massive cast of marionettes in one show, as long as you don't have too many on stage at any one time. If you're writing for people, you have to consider the financial aspects of costuming and how many people you actually want to put in the cast, you know, males versus females, what kind of acting pool you have to work with. You know, if you're writing a murder mystery on stage, you can't have a body suddenly die in the middle of an act and be lying there with the corpse in the middle of the stage for the rest of the act. So there's a lot of practical limits writing for the theater that you don't have writing a story. Actually, I've tried twice now. Three times. The second play I wrote, I actually rewrote it as a short story and put it in one of my books, just for the sheer challenge of doing it and for the fun of being able to suddenly have all these different settings, as opposed to, it was Shadow of Murder. And instead of it being the play that was literally in the hunting lodge the whole time, with the story, I was able to get out onto the highway and into the woods and, you know, have the different settings. So yeah, so it's a very different experience, but both are interesting challenges. I enjoy both.
Have you ever considered the challenge of a novel?
Yes, actually, I have a draft novel that I wrote years ago, and I would like to, every so often I go back and think, well, I should revisit this, and I probably will at some point, except that I always get sidetracked with more short stories. So, so hopefully I will find time and actually do that. Yes. Oh, and actually, no, that's not strictly true too. I wrote 6 Beary books, and then I was going to do a 7th one, and the lead story, I started writing it, but it really expanded. And so I actually have written it as a novel, and I've sent it out to a couple of publishers, and I'm sitting waiting to see if anyone picks it up. If not, I will put that one out myself and do independently. So I actually have written a novel, one mystery novel. Yes.
Oh,
It's
excellent.
ready to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe many moons ago you told me you actually self-published. So it was your advice that I followed. So thank you very much.
Oh, okay.
Um, I was wondering then, any upcoming projects? Is there any plays on the works, or are we still too worried about COVID? Any books
I
coming out?
haven't written any plays lately, because I mean, I've written 4 plays, and they've all been produced, some more than, you know, several times, which is great. So with COVID, I've tended to just shy away from that, because a lot of the theaters that are, you know, they're starting slowly, but so, you know, I might get back to that. But right now with COVID, it's just been great to write the short stories and send them out to anthologies and magazines and work that way. It's easy given the current situation and circumstances. It's like the Marionettes. We intended to start those again while we were up on the coast, especially as we have two very young new granddaughters who would love them in about 2 or 3 years from now. But COVID put a stop to that too.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've really put everything pretty much on hold except the short stories right now, but that's not to say I wouldn't go back to the other.
Excellent.
We'll see how things evolve.
You live fairly close to my parents, so if you put anything on, it gives me a visit to go, or a reason to go visit them again.
Oh, yes, that's right.
I also believe you have a short story in the Cold Canadian Crime Anthology that's coming in
Yes.
May 15th. So we'll talk a little bit more about that on another interview, but I look forward to reading that story too. About a week away. Not even. Great. So thank you very much for taking your time, Elizabeth, and doing this interview with us. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Erik. I really appreciate it.
And it was good seeing you again, even like this. And thank you very much. Thank you.